The tangent formulas are the ones that are a little bit frustrating, and that's because they are, if you look, fractions. Okay? So you have to work with that. So first of all, I'm going to tell you that this tangent of 195, I'm going to rewrite as the tangent, and I'm going to go with 135 plus 60. Because 135 plus 60 is 195, and both 135 and 60 are on the unit circle. Now if I see this, what that means is that I'm working with the formula that's talking about the tangent of u plus v off my formula sheet, which then says I have the tangent of u plus the tangent of v all over 1 minus the tangent of u times the tangent of v. That's the one off the formula sheet that I am using. If I write this down, what that's saying to me then is as I look at the formulas, I see that I'm now going to have the tangent of 135 plus the tangent of 60 divided by 1 minus the tangent of 135 times the tangent of 60. Now, if you look at your hand trick thing, we talked about before that tangent off to the side here, as a side note, that tangent of an angle is the sine or the cosine. Or in other words, when we used other things, we said it was the y value over the x value in the coordinates on our unit circle. So as we look at the hand trick thing, and you bend a finger, like for example in 135, that's a pi over 4 angle, so you're bending the middle finger, and what you notice is that you have the square root of 2 over the square root of 2, or sorry, square root of 2 over 2. But what I talked about is that when you do that, you can just take the number divided by the other number with the square roots, and that's the answer for the tangent. Or in other words, this stuff on the right-hand side over here is your y value, and then the stuff that's on the left-hand side of the bent finger, that's your x value, and you divide the y by the x. So it's the square root of 2 divided by the square root of 2. Now if that doesn't make any sense to you, that's fine. Take the y value divided by the x value, simplify the fraction, and keep going. But I'm not going to do that because that's too much work. So I'm going to use that hand trick. And what I mean by that is when I look at what's going on, the tangent of 135, when I simplify that, that's just 1. Because it's the square root of 2 over 2 divided by the square root of 2 over 2. 1. The cool thing is, whatever I see here, that's the same as what I see here. Those are the same answers. So when I get to that point, I don't have to worry about that again. With 60 degrees, I know that 60 degrees is the same as a pi over 3. So I bend the pi over 3 finger, I take the y value, which is the square root of 3, divided by the x value, which is the square root of 1. They're both over 2, so they're going to invert, multiply, and cancel. So I have the square root of 3 over 1. That's going to be square root of 3. And in the first part, where I said tangent of 135, since it was in the second quadrant, don't forget that's negative 1. Okay, not positive 1, but negative 1. That means down below, from the formula, I have that 1 and the minus sign, and then I have two things that are being multiplied. One of them was the negative 1, and one of them was the square root of 3. Because we had that negative 1, which was the tangent of 135, and we also had the tangent of 60, which was the square root of 3. Now, if you get to this point, I'll give you all but 1 point on the test. if you can simplify that, I'll give you the last point. So if you're simplifying this, the first thing that you probably should do is you probably should write it with without the parentheses and all that kind of stuff. So for example, what I'm talking about there is that on the top, you are going to have -1 plus radical 3, and on the bottom you're going to have 1 plus radical 3. In order to get rid of that stuff that's on the denominator, you have to multiply by the complex conjugate. Or not complex, excuse me, just the conjugate. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate of the denominator, which is 1 minus radical 3. The reason that you do that is because the denominator here now becomes 1 times 1, which is 1, minus square root of 3 times square root of 3, which is just 3. So that was kind of the whole purpose of multiplying by the conjugate. There are no more radicals on the bottom, the denominator. On the top, we have -1 times 1, which is -1. We have -1 times negative radical 3, that's positive radical 3. We have radical 3 times 1, which is positive radical 3. And we have radical 3 times negative radical 3, which is just -3. If I simplify the numerator, I get -1 and -3, which is -4. And I get radical 3 plus radical 3, which is 2 of those radical 3's. In the denominator, when I simplify, I get -2. And then, to make it all better, I can divide the -4 by the -2, and that's +2. I can divide the 2 radical 3 by -2, and that's negative radical 3. In the gray circle is your final answer for the extra point. Number 5. In number 5, we're working with finding the exact value. This is where decimals are not allowed. So if you do decimals, you're kind of in big trouble. And whenever you see this kind of stuff, remember it's always about clues and trying to figure things out that way. Whenever you see these kind of restrictions, I want you to think triangle. So what I mean by that is that we're going to be talking about a triangle, and what you'll notice is they have 2 different letters. Do you notice how they have this other set of information right here? So actually there's not one triangle, there's 2 triangles. Let's talk about the sine triangle first. Do you notice how in the sine triangle they tell you that the sine is 4/5? You guys see that? That means that my sine is positive. The sine is positive in the first quadrant and in the second quadrant. And then the second thing that they tell me is that the x is in between 0 and pi/2, which is right here. So that means that I'm drawing my triangle for the sine in the first quadrant. What do they call the angle for that triangle? No, they don't. They call it x. Very good, Carly. It says so right up there. It says the sine of x. So this is an x right here next to the origin. And they tell me that the sine is 4/5, which means the opposite over the hypotenuse. You can Pythagorean theorem that baby, and you find out the other side is a 3. This triangle is representing the green highlighted stuff. Let's look at the yellow triangle, or the yellow information, excuse me. In the yellow information, they tell me that my cosine is negative. I know that's true in the second and the third quadrants. They tell me that my y angle is in between pi/2 and pi. Which quadrant is that? Second quadrant. So I draw my triangle for that one in the second quadrant. What's the name of that angle? It is a y. Good job. They tell me that that cosine is negative 12 thirteenths. That means the adjacent is negative 12 and the hypotenuse is 13. We can Pythagorean theorem that and you find out it's 5. These are the two triangles that are associated with the information. Questions on that? If I look at the sine of x plus y, and I look on my formula sheet, what that means, even though our formula sheet probably talks about u's and v's, is that I'm going to have the sine of u plus v, my two angles, be equal to the sine of u, the cosine of v, plus the cosine of u sine of v. This is off of the formula sheet. So the u angle is like my x, and the v is like my y. So keep that in mind. They're both alphabetical. If I write that down, looking at my two triangles, in the u triangle, the sine of u, which is the same as my x, is going to be...
Oh, never mind.
Look in the blue triangle, what's the sine? 4/5. Good job. In the blue triangle, the sine of the angle is 4/5. Opposite over hypotenuse. In the V triangle, which is really the same as y, my cosine is negative 12 thirteenths. I'm color coding it so you can see which triangle they came from. Oh. The cosine of u, which was from the blue triangle, is 3/5. And the sine of v, which is from the pink triangle, is 5/13. Now it's all about simplifying the fractions. So when I go to simplify those fractions, on the left I have negative 48/65 plus 15/65. Oh look, they already have the common denominator. I put them together and my answer is negative 33/65. Final answer.